Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim unveiled the revised Budget 2023 today. It's the country's second spending framework to be tabled for this year. A quick look at some of the key economic highlights. 388.1 billion ringgit earmarked for spending this year. That's higher than the 372.3 billion ringgit budget tabled last October and the 332.1 billion ringgit budget 2022. 289.1 billion ringgit will be set aside for OPEX and 99 billion ringgit for development spending. Revenue to come in at 291.5 billion ringgit, with Petronas estimated to pay a dividend of 40 billion ringgit. Economic growth seen moderating to 4.5% this year from last year's 8.7%. Inflation 2.8% to 3.8%, while the jobless rate is expected to stand at between 3.8% and 4%. Fiscal deficit projected at 93.94 billion ringgit, equivalent to 5% of GDP. Total debt to reach 1.2 trillion ringgit, or over 60% of GDP. And now some of the key takeaways of the new Budget 2023. So how will Madani budget affect Malaysians? Let's start with taxes. Income taxes, to be specific. Those in the 35,000 ringgit to 100,000 ringgit taxable income bracket will see a cut of 2 percentage points. Those with taxable incomes above 100,000 ringgit will see a hike of between 0.5 and 2 percentage points. No GST. Instead, PM Anwar is looking at taxes on luxury goods like watches and fashion products this year. Also, possibly a low-rate capital gains tax on disposal of shareholdings in privately owned companies starting next year. Excise duties on liquid nicotine that is used in e-cigarettes and vapes. And then there are the incentives, benefits and initiatives to look forward to. For starters, the government intends to bring back a scheme to waive the penalties for the self-declaration of unpaid taxes. Also on the cards, an amendment to the Insolvency Act 1967 so that bankruptcy cases can be discharged more quickly. This plus the immediate release of cases owing less than 50,000 ringgit starting March 1st. PT-PTN borrowers will get a discount of up to 20% on their repayments for 3 months starting March. If they have been earning 1,800 ringgit and below for 6 months, they can get their repayments postponed. From 2024, Sharia savings assets under EPF will be fully segregated to provide competitive returns to Sharia account holders. Those aged 40 to 54 with less than 10,000 ringgit in their EPF account 1 will get 500 ringgit added to their respective accounts. 5.1% dividend for Amanah Saham Bumiputra members with savings of less than 30,000 ringgit. Putrajaya will also cover the driving test fees for B2 motorcycle, bus, taxi and e-hailing licenses. Also 200 ringgit e-wallet credit for Malaysian youths aged 18 to 20. Meanwhile, households with a combined income of less than 2,500 ringgit will get up to 2,500 ringgit in cash assistance. On top of that, the poor and hardcore poor registered under e-Kasih will get 600 ringgit in the form of food baskets or vouchers. In his revised Budget 2023 speech, the PM emphasised the importance of digitalisation and innovation in businesses and backed it up with a number of incentives across the board. Among them, tax deduction of up to 1.5 million ringgit for listing expenses on the ACE market and LEAD market up to the year of assessment 2025. This tax deduction also covers the listing cost for technology-based companies on Bursa Malaysia's main board. Also in the plans, the listing of dual-class shares on the local bourse so as to encourage the listing of high-growth technology companies locally. The Securities Commission will also facilitate private market instruments in the secondary market to enhance liquidity and enable better price discovery. In terms of support, organisations such as Khazanah Nasional and the EPF will invest in local startups that are deemed innovative and high growth potential with an investment of 1.5 billion ringgit. As for micro, small and medium enterprises, the tax on the first 150,000 ringgit taxable income will be cut from 17% to 15%. Anwar said government agencies are also set to continue the provision of 40 billion ringgit in financing facilities to MSMEs. It was a measure that was introduced under Budget 2022 under the name Program Semarak Niaga Keluarga Malaysia. To drive automation and digitalisation, the government has allocated 100 million ringgit under the SME grant scheme with matching grants available. Separately, there is also a 1 billion ringgit facility under Bank Negara aimed at doing the same. Bank Simpanan Nasional, BNM and Tekun will also provide another 1.7 billion ringgit in loan facilities to help micro-entrepreneurs, women and youths. Infrastructure projects were a main feature of the PM's revised budget 2023, but the indication seemed that the budget will go more towards bread and butter issues and that a few major projects will be undergoing review. One of the most notable, a detailed review of MRT3. This should cut the final cost to 45 billion ringgit, which is even lower than the 50 billion ringgit price tag announced by the previous government. Also, 6 flood mitigation projects that the government will be retendering latest by June. This will cover Sungai Johor, Sungai Rasau and Sungai Klang in Selangor and Sungai Golo in Kelantan. According to the PM, the government could potentially save 2 billion ringgit out of the 15 billion ringgit previously allocated to those flood projects. The PM also pledged to accelerate a number of projects this year. 1.2 billion ringgit will go towards repair of 400 clinics in poor condition and 380 dilapidated schools, a situation Anwar called unacceptable. 2.7 billion ringgit will be for maintaining and upgrading federal roads and 1.5 billion ringgit for new rural roads, along with 50 million alone for street lights. The allocation for the Malaysian Road Records Information or MARIS will be increased to 5.2 billion ringgit to maintain state roads. Putrajaya intends to also upgrade the Penang and Subang airports, spearheaded by Malaysia Airports Holdings. This is expected to promote economic growth at a cost far lower than the proposal to build a new airport in Kulim, Kedah, which was expected to cost 7 billion ringgit. It plans to get the private sector to develop the main port at Carey Island, part of its bid to attract more international investment and tourists to the country. It will also make the Tun Razak Exchange in KL and Iskandar Malaysia in Johor financial zones. As for East Malaysia, 6.5 billion ringgit will be spent on developments in Sabah and 5.6 billion ringgit in Sarawak. In terms of allocations, it is the Education Ministry that is set to receive the biggest share of 55.2 billion ringgit. 2.3 billion ringgit will go towards upgrading infrastructure and putting in the best learning facilities in all schools. 15.3 billion ringgit will go to the Higher Education Ministry, 436 million ringgit to repair infrastructure and replace obsolete equipment, and 35 million ringgit to enhance internet connectivity at higher learning institutions. Second largest, or 36.3 billion ringgit, is going to the Health Ministry. Most of this will be used to buy medicine, reagents, vaccines and consumables. 3 billion ringgit will be set aside for new permanent positions and appointment of over 1,500 contract medical officers, contract dentists and contract pharmacists. A few notable mentions sector-wise. In tourism, 250 million ringgit has been allocated to promote the sector in line with Visit Malaysia Year 2025. Putrajaya is targeting the arrival of 23.5 million international tourists and a projected income of up to 76.8 billion ringgit. In agriculture, the government is planning to give, among others, various subsidies and incentives amounting to 1.6 billion ringgit to rice farmers, plus tax incentives and grants to encourage private sector investment in large-scale agriculture. Also, Bursa has agreed to a 30% profit-sharing plan from rice imports to rice farmers. Now, Budget 2023 also includes some green initiatives. For state governments, it will up the allocation for ecological fiscal transfer for biodiversity conservation to 150 million ringgit a year from 70 million previously. As for green business initiatives, BNM will provide financing of up to 2 billion ringgit to support green technology startups and help SMEs implement low-carbon practices. Khazanah will provide 150 million ringgit to environmentally friendly project development. And a green technology financing scheme will be rolled out with an increased allocation of 3 billion ringgit until 2025. The government also plans to extend the green incentive period for investment tax allowance and green income tax exemption schemes until the end of 2025.